First Contact Protocol. The Horizon's Edge slipped out of hyperspace like a ghost materializing from dreams. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, her dark eyes scanning the star-filled void ahead. 3 months into their deep space exploration mission, her crew had grown comfortable with the routine of mapping uncharted systems. Today would shatter that comfort forever. "Contact ahead, Captain," Lieutenant Marcus Webb called from the navigation station. His steady voice carried a note of concern that made Elena's pulse quicken. Multiple ships in orbit around the fourth planet. Elena moved closer to Marcus's station, close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with the metallic tang of recycled ship air. They'd served together for 2 years, and she'd grown to appreciate his calm competence under pressure. More than appreciate if she was honest with herself. "How many ships?" she asked, studying the tactical display over his shoulder. 67 vessels in formation," Marcus replied, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Configuration suggests a blockade pattern. Captain, these aren't exploration ships." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the distant fleet. Even at maximum magnification, the ships appeared sleek and predatory, their dark hulls gleaming with an alien aesthetic that spoke of advanced technology and military purpose. "Red alert!" Elena ordered. "All hands to battle stations." Warning klaxons echoed through the corridors as the crew scrambled to their positions. Dr. Nova Sterling's voice crackled over the comm from sickbay, confirming medical readiness. Elena's throat tightened. They were one ship against an armada. "Captain," Communications Officer Lieutenant Raven Park looked up from her station. "I'm detecting transmissions between the fleet and the planet's surface. The tone pattern suggests ultimatums." Elena felt Marcus shift beside her, his arm brushing hers as he leaned over his console. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, even as dread settled in her stomach. "Analysis of the planet?" she asked. "Population approximately 50 million, Marcus reported. Technology level suggests they're pre-interstellar. No orbital defenses detected." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, seeing the tactical situation clearly. An advanced military force preparing to subjugate a defenseless world. Everything in her Terran Federation training told her to retreat, to report back to command, to let someone else make the hard choices. She opened her eyes and found Marcus watching her, something unspoken passing between them. "Plot intercept course," she ordered. "Take us between that fleet and the planet." "Elena," Marcus said quietly, using her first name for the first time on duty. "That's a suicide run." She turned to face him fully, noting how the bridge lighting caught the concern in his blue eyes. "Maybe, but we didn't come out here to watch genocide." Aboard the Draconian flagship Star Render, Admiral Kethvar observed the approaching vessel with growing irritation. His scaled features twisted into a scowl as he studied the primitive design of the newcomer. "Analysis," he commanded. Communications Officer Zaranin looked up from her station, her violet eyes bright with curiosity. "Unknown configuration, Admiral. The vessel appears to be constructed of crude metal alloys rather than energy-bonded materials." Kethvar's clawed hand tightened on his command throne's armrest. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, the Draconian Empire had never encountered a species foolish enough to challenge them with such primitive technology. "Send standard surrender demand," he ordered. The message crossed space in seconds, decoded by the Horizon's Edge's translation matrix. Elena listened to the artificial voice deliver the ultimatum with growing anger. "They want us to surrender and prepare for processing," Lieutenant Park reported. Marcus stepped closer to Elena, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Your orders, Captain." Elena looked at the tactical display showing their single ship facing the massive fleet. She thought of the 50 million people below, probably looking up at the stars and wondering if help would come. She thought of Marcus beside her, of her crew trusting her judgment, of the oath she'd taken to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "Open a channel," she said. The transmission reached the Draconian fleet moments later. Zaranin translated the human response, her voice carrying a note of admiration despite herself. "We come in peace, but we stand ready to defend the innocent." Admiral Kethvar felt his blood temperature rise. No species had dared speak to the Empire as equals in millennia. This primitive vessel was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. On the human bridge, Elena felt Marcus's hand brush against hers, a gesture of support and something deeper. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words and possibilities that might never be explored. "All stations report ready, Captain," Dr. Sterling's voice came over the comm. Elena straightened, feeling the weight of command and the warmth of Marcus's presence beside her. "Then let's see what humanity can do." Shields and hearts. The first draconian attack came like liquid lightning. 3 destroyers peeled away from the main fleet, their hulls crackling with suppression energy designed to paralyze any vessel. Admiral Kethvar watched with satisfaction as the beams struck the primitive human ship. His satisfaction turned to confusion when the energy scattered harmlessly across the horizons. "Edge's hull like rain on armor plating. Impossible, Commander," Thexil muttered from the tactical station. "No known technology can deflect suppression beams." On the human bridge, Lieutenant Marcus Webb monitored their defensive systems with growing amazement. "Kinetic barriers are holding perfectly, Captain. Their energy weapons can't penetrate our magnetic field generators." Elena Vasquez felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. They might actually survive the first exchange, but what came next would determine everything. "Dr. Sterling, damage report?" "No damage detected," came Nova's calm voice from sickbay. "Whatever they're throwing at us, our defenses are handling it." The Draconian fleet responded with overwhelming force. 50 ships unleashed plasma cannons and disruptor beams, filling space with enough destructive energy to vaporize a small moon. The combined assault lit up the darkness like a miniature star being born. Elena instinctively grabbed Marcus's arm as the ship shuddered slightly under the bombardment. The contact sent electricity through both of them that had nothing to do with the battle outside. "Still no penetration," Marcus reported, his voice slightly breathless. "Elena, their weapons are completely ineffective against us." It was the second time he'd used her first name, and Elena found herself reluctant to let go of his arm. In the midst of impossible danger, she was acutely aware of his warmth, his steadiness, the way his eyes never left her face when he spoke. "Return fire," she ordered, forcing herself to focus. "Railgun Bay 1, target the lead destroyer." Weapons Officer Lieutenant Commander Janet Pierce smiled grimly. "Firing now, Captain." The railgun's electromagnetic coils accelerated a tungsten rod to nearly light speed. The projectile crossed the distance in seconds, striking the Draconian destroyer before its crew could even register the threat. Aboard Star Render, Zaranin watched in shock as the destroyer simply broke apart. One moment it was a proud warship, the next it was expanding debris and escaping atmosphere. "What happened?" Admiral Kethvar demanded. "They fired some kind of solid projectile," Thexil reported, his voice shaking. "It moved faster than our sensors could track. The impact energy was..." He paused, checking his readings again. "Admiral, it was like being hit by a small asteroid traveling at relativistic speed." Zaranin found herself studying the human transmission patterns with new interest. These beings had destroyed a draconian warship with what appeared to be a metal rod. The efficiency was terrifying and somehow elegant. Elena watched the destruction with mixed emotions. She'd never taken a life before, never ordered an attack that would kill. Marcus seemed to sense her turmoil. "Captain," he said quietly, moving closer so only she could hear. "They would have done the same to 50 million people on that planet." His hand found hers on the command chair armrest, fingers intertwining briefly. The gesture was hidden from the rest of the bridge crew, but it steadied Elena's resolve. "Target their command ship," she ordered. Warning shot across their bow. The second railgun shot streaked past the Star Render, close enough that the kinetic wake rattled the massive vessel. Admiral Kethvar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of warfare. Genuine fear. "Sir," Zaranin called out, "the human ship is transmitting again." Elena's voice came through the translation matrix. Firm but not threatening. "Draconian fleet, you have seen what our weapons can do. Withdraw from this system now, and no more of your people need to die." Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display, His fleet, which had conquered star systems, was being held at bay by a single primitive vessel. The shame of it burned in his chest like acid. "All ships," he commanded, "maintain distance and continue bombardment. Do not let them close range." On the horizon's edge, Elena watched the draconian fleet spread out, trying to attack from multiple angles. Their plasma beams continued to splash harmlessly against the ship's defenses. "They're not retreating," Marcus observed, his hand still near hers on the chair. "Then we'll have to convince them," Elena replied. She looked into his eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. In the heat of battle, surrounded by impossible odds, she realized that Marcus Webb was the one constant that kept her grounded. Dr. Sterling's voice interrupted the moment. "Captain, I'm monitoring stress levels across the crew. Everyone's holding up well, but the psychological impact of this engagement—" "Understood, Nova," Elena replied. She squeezed Marcus's hand once, drawing strength from the contact. "All stations prepare for extended combat. We're not leaving until this planet is safe." Zaranin listened to the human transmissions with growing fascination. Their language patterns showed no fear, no uncertainty about their cause. They spoke of protecting people they'd never met, of standing against impossible odds not for conquest or glory, but for justice. It was unlike anything in her experience with the Empire. As another railgun shot destroyed a second draconian destroyer, Zaranin began to wonder if her people had been wrong about the nature of strength, about what it meant to be civilized. The thought was dangerous, possibly treasonous. It was also impossible to dismiss. Breaking chains, the third hour of battle found the draconian fleet in chaos. Admiral Kethvar had lost 12 ships to the human vessel's impossible weapons, while his own attacks continued to prove useless. Worse, his carefully maintained formation was falling apart as captains began making their own decisions about survival. "Sir," Commander Thexil reported with barely controlled panic, "3 more ships are requesting permission to withdraw." Kethvar's claws dug into his command chair. In 3 millennia of conquest, the word "withdraw" had never been spoken on a draconian flagship. "Denied! We are the Empire! We do not flee from primitives!" Another railgun shot punctuated his words, turning a fleeing destroyer into scattered metal and vapor. Aboard the horizon's edge, Elena felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Each shot she ordered ended lives, but the alternative was allowing genocide. She was grateful for Marcus's steady presence beside her, his quiet confidence helping her stay focused. "Captain," Communications Officer Raven Park called out, "I'm detecting hyperspace signatures. Multiple contacts inbound." Elena's heart skipped. If more draconian ships were arriving, even their advanced weapons might not be enough. "How many?" Marcus's hands flew over his console, analyzing the sensor data. 12 ships, but... He paused, a smile spreading across his face. "Elena, they're human ships." "Federation Navy." The relief that washed through Elena was so intense she had to grip the chair arms to steady herself. Marcus reached over and briefly covered her hand with his. The gesture hidden from the crew but deeply felt by both of them. "The cavalry arrives." Dr. Sterling's voice came over the comm with audible relief. The new arrivals dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Elena recognized the configuration immediately, a Federation task force led by a heavy cruiser. As they approached, a familiar voice crackled through the communications system. "Horizon's Edge, this is Captain Rex Morrison aboard the Intrepid. Heard you could use some backup?" Elena smiled despite the ongoing battle. Rex had been her rival at the Academy, always competing for top marks in tactical simulations. Now she'd never been happier to see him. "Rex, good to see you," she replied. "We've been keeping them busy." On the planet below, Prime Meridian Jassara watched the sky with growing hope. The strange new ship had appeared just as draconian landing forces were preparing to descend. Now more ships had arrived, and the invaders seemed to be retreating. Her people had been preparing for subjugation or death. Instead, they were witnessing something unprecedented, someone fighting for them. Zaranin monitored the arriving human ships with fascination. Their formation was tight, disciplined, but they didn't immediately open fire. Instead, they took defensive positions around their lone defender. "Admiral," she reported, The human reinforcements are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. I'm detecting what appears to be evacuation instructions to our damaged ships. Kethvar stared at her. Evacuation instructions? Yes, sir. They're offering medical assistance to our wounded and safe passage to escape pods. This was beyond Kethvar's comprehension. In draconian warfare, damaged enemy vessels were destroyed without thought for survivors. These humans were offering aid to their enemies, even while fighting them. Elena watched the tactical display as Rex's task force took position. The odds had shifted dramatically, but she found herself hoping the Draconians would see reason and withdraw rather than face annihilation. "Marcus," she said quietly, "patch me through to the Draconian fleet." He nodded, establishing the connection with practiced efficiency. Their hands brushed as he handed her the communication headset, and Elena felt the familiar spark of electricity between them. "Draconian fleet, this is Captain Vasquez," she broadcast. "You've seen what happens when you threaten innocent people in human space. Withdraw now, and we'll provide medical assistance to your wounded. Continue this attack, and we'll be forced to destroy every ship in your fleet." The transmission reached the star render as Kethvar struggled with concepts that challenged everything he believed about warfare and civilization. These humans fought like demons when protecting others, but offered mercy to their enemies. Zaranin found herself hoping the Admiral would accept the offer. She'd monitored human communications throughout the battle, and heard nothing but concern for minimizing casualties. "Even enemy casualties. They're offering us mercy," she said. Quietly, Thexel looked at her in shock. "We don't accept mercy from inferiors. Are they inferior?" Zaranin asked, studying the tactical display showing draconian debris fields and undamaged human ships. "We came here with 67 ships. They faced us with one and held their ground. Now they offer us life when they could choose death." For the first time in his career, Admiral Kethvar found himself considering retreat. Not from cowardice, but from a growing recognition that he might be facing something genuinely superior to the Empire's way of thinking. On the horizon's edge, Elena felt Marcus move closer as they waited for the draconian response. The adrenaline of battle was fading, replaced by exhaustion and the awareness of how close they'd come to destruction. "Elena," Marcus said softly, using the brief lull to voice what had been building between them for months. "When this is over, I need to tell you something." She looked into his eyes, seeing warmth and determination there. "After we save a planet seems like good timing for personal confessions." His smile was answer enough. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The draconian response came as a general retreat order. One by one, the surviving ships broke orbit and fled into hyperspace, leaving behind only debris and a planet full of people discovering that the universe held protectors as well as predators. Unlikely alliances. The Horizon's Edge maintained orbit around Meridian as diplomatic shuttles ferried between ships and planet. Elena stood in her ready room, watching the peaceful blue world through the viewports. When the door chimed, "Enter," she called, turning to see Marcus carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her a cup. Their fingers touched as she accepted it, a moment of warmth in the aftermath of chaos. "Rex wants to recommend us all for the Federation Medal of Valor," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Says what we did here will change how the galaxy sees humanity." Elena sipped her coffee, noting how Marcus looked more relaxed than she'd seen him in months. The successful defense had lifted a weight from all their shoulders. "And what about what we discussed during the battle?" Marcus set down his cup and leaned forward. "Elena, I've served with you for 2 years. I've watched you make impossible decisions and somehow find the right answer every time. What I felt yesterday wasn't just admiration for my captain." She felt her pulse quicken. Command regulations were clear about relationships between officers, but they were also clear about exceptional circumstances. "Marcus, I know the regulations," he said quietly. "But I also know that life is uncertain out here, and some things are worth the risk." Before Elena could respond, her communication panel chimed. "Captain," came Raven Park's voice, "we're receiving a priority transmission from an approaching draconian vessel. Single ship broadcasting surrender codes." Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. "On our way," Elena replied. The bridge was tense as they watched the lone draconian ship approach under a flag of truce. It was smaller than the warships they'd faced, configured more for communication than combat. "They're requesting permission to come alongside," Raven reported. "The transmission is from someone identifying herself as Communications Officer Zaranin, the one who was translating during the battle," Marcus noted. "Why would she come back?" Elena made her decision. "Grant permission. Have security meet them in Shuttle Bay, too." An hour later, Elena found herself facing a young draconian woman whose violet eyes held an intelligence that reminded her of Marcus's analytical mind. Zaranin's scaled skin shimmered with nervous energy as she spoke through a translation device. "Captain Vasquez, I come seeking asylum and offering information about Imperial plans for this sector." Elena studied her carefully. "Why? Yesterday you were part of the fleet trying to conquer this planet." Zaranin's expression grew passionate. "Yesterday I learned that strength isn't about conquering the weak. I monitored your communications during the battle. You could have destroyed our entire fleet, but you offered mercy. You fought not for conquest, but for protection. This is not the Empire's way." Dr. Sterling, who had insisted on being present for the meeting, leaned forward. "What can you tell us about the Empire's plans?" "Senator Vexara is coming with a larger fleet," Zaranin said. "She believes the defeat here was an anomaly. She intends to make an example of this system and your ship." Elena felt Marcus tense beside her. "How long do we have?" 3 days, perhaps 4. But, Captain, there are others like me in the Empire. Officers who have grown tired of endless conquest, who have begun questioning whether might truly makes right. Commander Diana Cross, Elena's former instructor who had arrived with Rex's task force, spoke up. "You're talking about internal revolution." "I'm talking about evolution," Zaranin replied. "Your people have shown us a different way of thinking about strength and civilization. Some of us want to learn more." Elena made her decision. "Dr. Sterling, see that our guest has quarters." Full diplomatic courtesy. As the meeting broke up, Marcus lingered behind with Elena. "You realize what this means," he said. "We're not just defending a planet anymore. We're potentially starting a galactic civil war." Elena moved closer to him, close enough to see the concern in his eyes. "Then we'd better make sure we're on the right side." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "Together?" "Together," she confirmed, then kissed him softly. The kiss was gentle, full of promise and determination. When they separated, Elena saw her own resolve reflected in Marcus's eyes. Over the next 2 days, more draconian ships arrived under truce flags. Officers who had monitored the battle, who had heard the human offers of mercy and medical aid, who had begun questioning the Empire's doctrine of conquest through strength. Zaranin found herself becoming an informal ambassador, helping translate not just language but concepts of cooperation and voluntary alliance. She worked closely with Dr. Sterling, learning about human medicine and philosophy. "Your people heal enemies," she observed during one session. "In the Empire, we simply replace the broken." Nova smiled. "Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even former enemies." Meanwhile, Elena and Marcus worked with Rex and Diana to coordinate defenses for the inevitable Imperial response. Their relationship had moved beyond stolen moments to open acknowledgement, with Elena formally requesting an exception to fraternization regulations based on exceptional circumstances. The Federation Council is fascinated by these developments. Diana reported during a strategy meeting. "First contact with a galactic empire, successful defense against impossible odds, and now potential allies from within their own ranks. Elena, you've started something that could reshape the entire galaxy." Elena looked around the table at the mixed group of humans and draconians working together, planning defenses not just for one planet but for the principle of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "We all started something," she corrected. "The question now is whether we can finish it." Zaranin spoke up from her position at the table. "Senator Vexara commands 200 ships. She is ruthless and believes absolutely in Imperial superiority. She will not offer surrender terms." Marcus squeezed Elena's hand under the table. "Then we'll have to convince her that some things are worth fighting for." No matter the odds, outside the conference room windows, the peaceful world of Meridian continued its rotation, its people living free because strangers had been willing to risk everything for them. Soon, that freedom would be tested again. But this time, they wouldn't face the darkness alone. New Horizons. Senator Vex Ara's fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts. 200 ships in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the absolute confidence of 3 millennia of unopposed conquest. On the bridge of her flagship Empire's Wrath, Vexara studied the tactical display with cold satisfaction. "One human ship dared challenge the Empire," she said to her assembled officers. "Today we remind the galaxy what happens to those who defy draconian authority." What she found waiting for her shattered every assumption about human capabilities. Elena stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Edge, now flagship of a mixed fleet that would have been impossible to imagine a week ago. Alongside Rex's Federation task force floated 17 draconian ships whose crews had chosen conscience over conquest. Most remarkably, the Meridian Defense Force had contributed 12 vessels of their own design, ships that looked primitive but incorporated human kinetic weapon technology. "Quite a family we've assembled," Marcus observed from his station. As Elena's acknowledged partner and co-commander, he'd taken on coordinating the mixed fleet's operations. Their relationship had become an open symbol of the cooperation they were trying to build. Zaranin, now wearing a human uniform with special insignia representing the growing draconian resistance, monitored Imperial communications. "Senator Vexara is demanding immediate surrender of all rebel elements and the execution of human leadership." Elena smiled grimly. "Send our response." The transmission that reached Vexara carried the voices of multiple species, translated into perfect draconian. "Senator, this is the Meridian Defense Alliance. Your Empire's time of unchallenged conquest is over. We stand together, free worlds and free peoples, and we will not be moved." Vexara's response was predictable and overwhelming. 200 ships unleashed the combined firepower of the Imperial Navy's finest vessels. Plasma storms and disruptor beams lit up space like an artificial aurora. The Alliance fleet's response revolutionized galactic warfare forever. Kinetic barriers, now installed on draconian rebel ships and Meridian vessels, deflected energy weapons harmlessly. Railguns, mass drivers, and hybrid kinetic plasma cannons tore through Imperial shields designed only for energy-based attacks. Most crucially, the mixed fleet fought with a coordination born of mutual trust rather than fear of punishment. "Impossible," Vexara breathed as she watched her lead squadrons disintegrate under the concentrated fire. "No coalition should be able to coordinate like this." On the Horizon's Edge, Elena coordinated the battle with Marcus while staying in constant communication with their allies. Former Admiral Kethvar, now calling himself Commander Kethvar of the Free Draconian Forces, led his reformed squadron with tactical brilliance unclouded by Imperial doctrine. "Elena," Marcus said during a brief lull, "look at the tactical display." She studied the formation and felt her breath catch. The mixed fleet moved like a living organism, each ship type supporting the other's strengths and covering their weaknesses. Human innovation, draconian tactical experience, and Meridian determination had created something greater than the sum of its parts. Dr. Sterling's voice came from the medical bay. "Casualties across all Alliance ships are minimal. The Draconians' medical technology is helping us treat injuries we've never seen before, while our trauma protocols are saving their people in ways they didn't think possible." The battle's turning point came when Zaranin successfully hacked the Imperial communication network, broadcasting human recordings of their mercy offers and medical assistance to wounded enemies. Across the Imperial fleet, officers and crew heard evidence of a different way of thinking about strength and civilization. "Senator," reported Vexara's tactical officer, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 ships. Their crews are requesting to join the Alliance." Vexara watched in horror as her perfectly disciplined fleet began to fracture. Ships she had commanded for decades were turning their weapons away from the enemy and toward their former comrades. The final Imperial resistance collapsed when Commander Kethvar opened a direct channel to Vexara herself. "Senator," his voice carried across space, "I spent 3,000 years believing that strength meant the power to destroy. These humans taught me that true strength is the power to protect and build. Join us, and help create something better than endless conquest." Vexara's reply was to order her remaining ships to ram the Alliance fleet, preferring destruction to defeat. But even this final desperate order found only scattered obedience as more Imperial crews chose conscience over duty. In the end, the great battle lasted only 6 hours. When the shooting stopped, the Meridian system hosted the largest collection of free ships the galaxy had ever seen. Humans, Draconians, Meridians, and representatives from a dozen worlds that had sent secret observers to witness the confrontation. Elena found herself in the strange position of giving a victory speech to multiple species while standing beside Marcus on a bridge that had become the symbol of galactic cooperation. "This isn't the end of the Draconian Empire," she said, her words broadcast across hundreds of ships. "But it's the beginning of something better. A galaxy where strength is measured not by what you can destroy, but by what you can protect and build together." Zaranin, now serving as the first ambassador of the Free Draconian Alliance, added her own words. "For 3 millennia we spread fear across the stars. Today, we begin spreading hope." 6 months later, Elena and Marcus stood in the observation deck of the New Horizon, a jointly constructed exploration vessel crewed by multiple species. They wore matching rings crafted from metals donated by 20 different worlds, their marriage having become a symbol of the unity they'd helped create. "The Federation Council approved our next mission," Marcus said, wrapping his arms around Elena from behind as they watched the stars. "Deep space exploration, charting the sectors beyond former Imperial space." Elena leaned back against his chest, feeling the contentment of knowing they would face the unknown together. "Looking for more worlds that need protecting?" "Looking for more friends," Marcus corrected. "The galaxy's bigger than any of us imagined. And if there are more species out there like the Empire, they need to see what cooperation can accomplish." Through the viewport, they could see escort ships from a dozen species, all flying in formation toward the edge of known space. The silent stars that had once watched empires rise and fall were now witnessing something unprecedented. Former enemies working together to explore and protect rather than conquer. Behind them, Ambassador Chendar, the former Draconian warrior who now coordinated peace negotiations across 3 sectors, was discussing colony establishment with Dr. Sterling. Zaranin worked with Federation engineers to integrate the best of both technologies. The Meridian Defense Alliance had become something larger than any of them had dreamed. Not just a military coalition, but a genuine partnership of species committed to the idea that civilization meant protecting and nurturing rather than dominating. Elena smiled as she felt Marcus's hand cover hers on the railing. They had started as explorers, become defenders, and now were pioneers of a new kind of galactic community. The stars ahead held infinite possibilities, and for the first time in galactic history, multiple species would explore them together as equals and friends. The silent stars had finally found their voice, and it spoke of hope. The end.